Hey, this is Tempo Cauthon, and today we're going to be doing an in-depth look at Falstad talent builds. This is a hero you'll see me play a lot in the HGC for Tempo Storm. Personal stats are 10-1 with him after the first split, so it's a hero we've had a lot of success on. We're going to be covering what I consider to be the standard HGC Falstad build. We'll also cover when and why you should deviate from that build and pick different talents, especially in Hero League. And I'm also going to show you some key bindings that'll help you keep an eye on the map with global heroes. Alright, so let's just quickly cover the standard HGC build before we get into the talent tiers in depth. You pick up Seasoned Marksman at 1, then Hammer Gains at 4 for the lifesteal. Level 7 is a tier I got a lot of questions about initially, as you pick up a Mage Stat talent here with Boomerang, following 2 auto attack talents at 1 and 4. As the HGC has gone on, and we've seen the success this build has had, and we've also seen that Korea tends to use this build as their standard now as well, it's become generally accepted that you just need the wave clear that this talent provides. It's too valuable to pass up, and the difference between your clear speed with this talent and with a different talent at 7 is substantial. So you pretty much just pick up this talent regardless of your other choices here at 7. Moving on to 10, you pick up Mighty Gust, then Giant Killer at 13. This talent isn't something that will always get a lot of value in games, but in pro compositions there tends to be at least 2 very beefy frontliners that give this talent a lot of value. 16, the move speed from Airy Gust is super useful for both map control, map pressure, and team fights. And then Epic Mount at 20, can't go wrong there. So the hot tip for Tier 1 is not to lock yourself into Seasoned Marksman until you're about to start that wave clear. Because in Hero League, Gathering Storm is often a much better choice due to the constant fighting and skirmishes that take place in the early game, rather than the clearing and rotating. The greatest strength of Seasoned Marksman is that it's simply free value. It doesn't make you play the game any differently, it's useful throughout the game, and it has an impressive power spike in the late game. The way that I want to play Falstad in competitive is to be using my Q to clear lanes and rotate to create map pressure. I don't want to be standing static in a lane and trading with opponents in order to start stacking it up. So, by no means is Seasoned Marksman better than Gathering Storm. It's just a matter of how I think the game will play out and the way that I want to play the game. Now, if you decide to stick with the group and build those Q stacks early, don't forget you have a lot of options to ruin the day of the enemy solo laner as well. So keep an eye on the other lanes. If you see them push up too far, collapse, let your teammate know you're coming, and go for that gank. Even if the reverse of this situation were true, where your laner had control and was pushed into the other wall, you can hold your fly, walk up top, and pressure that wall for free. What you're waiting for is the enemy teams rotate. If they rotate too many people, you can use your fly to get back down to the other lane and force a 4v3 or a 4v2 there instead. So the cool thing about his tier 2 talents is every one of them is perfectly viable, but each one will see the most value when used with a specific playstyle that complements the talent. Hammer Gains works best when used with a sustained map control and map presence style. Static Shield works best when used with a very offensive, aggressive approach that focuses on skirmishes, bullying rotations, and looking for those 1v1 opportunities to either trade efficiently or go for a kill. Updraft, though it does give you some additional chasing potential, it works best when used with a defensive survivability mindset to the game. Now in Hero League especially, enemy rotations can often be very predictable, so when you take Static Shield, you want to be that wall in between an enemy's rotation and the objective they want to get to. Even if you don't get that kill, chasing them off with the kind of efficient trades that Static Shield thrives on can help give your team a much bigger window for that 5v4 when you fly in, and the enemy is forced to take the long way around or go back to base completely. This talent works best with Gathering Storm, as will support an aggressive playstyle that seek out combat, and typically lead into Flowrider at 13. Hammer Gains works best with Seasoned Marksman, for the increased ability to stay out on the map building stacks. And Updraft works fine with either starting talent, is best used to counter heavy gank pressure, especially from heroes like Zeratul or Tracer, who can easily jump out of your lightning rod. So at 7, Boomerang? Way too good. Usually the automatic pick here, regardless of the rest of your talents. However, there are some rare situations where going Secret Weapon can actually be the better choice, such as, you find yourself on a team comprised of extremely heavy spell damage, and the enemy attempts to counterpick you with an Anubarak or an Azebo with the intent of going Superstition. In that situation, a full auto-attack build Falstad can be the best play. you may find yourself as the only source of significant damage to those heroes in the late game. Now, the proper way to use Secret Weapon is to first throw out your attack and then Q directly afterwards. This will empower your auto attack while it's in flight and allow you to hit 4 attacks with the bonus damage from Secret Weapon, as you'll see here, 3, 4. However, if you use your Q first and then attack afterwards, you'll only get 3 attacks with the bonus damage applied to them. Look at that boomerang wave clear. Insane. Lets you split push and then rotate where you need to be so much faster. As for the ultimate, I do think that the new Hinterlands is a completely fine choice in Hero League, although I would still recommend in any organized game or even team league game with your friends on voice comms to take Gust. It's just so versatile and easy to get value out of in any organized situation. The prime thing you should be looking for if you're going to use Hinterlands in Hero League is a very reliable short cooldown CC from your front line and either no cleanse on the enemy team or someone who hasn't been using cleanse effectively between level 7 and 10, and you can judge that for yourself. At 13, you'll want to grab either Flow Rider or Giant Killer. Most of the decisions on your playstyle take place on the earlier talent tiers, so at this point it's often just a product of the path you've chosen. You should take Giant Killer if you're going for an auto attack oriented build, and Flow Rider if you're doing a standard mage stat. The cool thing about Flow Rider that's sometimes overlooked is that your ability to solo smaller merc camps is actually significantly improved once you hit this talent. Since the merc camps, especially these siege giants, take a couple seconds to land an attack, you'll get that extra recharge rate from Flow Rider, and your second round of spells will come out much quicker. At 16, you'll want to grab Airy Gusts. It's one of those talents that just always gives you value. Extra move speed throughout the course of the game, and lowered activation time on Tailwind is just always useful, and the other 2 talents on this tier are pretty unimpressive. Crippling Hammer, if you have somebody else who's splitting the entire game, like a Dahaka or a Lost Vikings, etc., and your team tends to be sticking as 4 and is just kind of kiting and running away from the enemy team who's constantly trying to engage on you, you could maybe consider this talent, but it's pretty niche. Afterburner, let me tell you why I don't like this talent. So it sounds a little bit impressive on paper here, but when you see how the talent actually works, that 3 seconds of increased move speed, it slowly ticks down by 20% every like 0.75 seconds. And so you're actually only getting 1.5 seconds of move speed that would be greater than what you get from Airy Gusts anyway, where you passively move around at 125%. With this, you spend 1.5 seconds at 160 and then 140, and then after that you're just lower than you would be anyway, so mathematically this is just not a very impressive talent. And I mention it a little more in depth than the other talents I skip because this is one that I actually see people pick up a lot, and I feel like it just does not give very much value at all. I will cover all the talents at 20 briefly, but Epic Mount should be your default choice. It is just insanely valuable in so many ways. The versatility of this talent just allows you to split push much more effectively and aggressively, as you can get out anytime. Allows you to come to your teammates' aid to save people being ganked or to come in for teamfights nearly instantly. And even if you can't think of a fancy way to use it, you can just consider it to be a Bolt of the Storm with a much bigger range and much lower cooldown. Has a little bit of a wind-up time, but considering it's a giant ranged bolt on a 25-second cooldown, and in addition to Falstad's fast move speed and barrel roll, gives you so many positioning options in teamfights that its value is just undeniable. As for Call of the Wildhammer, I do not like this talent. Even though I think Hinterland's Blast is a perfectly fine choice in Hero League, I don't feel that this talent gives you enough value to justify taking it, even if you're going for that blow-up comp. 25% more damage, it's alright. The range is pretty irrelevant. It's already going to hit basically anything you can see to aim at. It's not so much that the talent is bad per se, it's just that Epic Mount is so good that 25% more damage just doesn't really cut it. I can't think of a situation I would want to take this in. For Wind Tunnel, there are occasional niche situations you would take this, mostly on Towers of Doom, if you really want to secure those late caps or to escort a camp in for those extra sapper shots. This can be a perfectly fine option to take to close out a game. You can also consider taking this when, say, you end up winning a fight and your team calls for a core rush. If your flight is down, but your gust is up and it's going to be a tight race to the finish, you can get a little more value out of wind tunnel pushing back the enemy for a few extra seconds and trying to secure that core kill. Same kind of goes for Nexus Frenzy. Like, if your gust is on cooldown and you're in that situation I just described, this should just be a default choice because it'll give you a little extra damage on the core. This talent is actually perfectly fine though when you're going for a full auto attack build. I would say it's the only talent I would take in like crazy niche situations other than Epic Mount. As you may find yourself as like the sole damage dealer that's effective against an Anubarak or an Azebo in the late game. You may need to have something like this to help push that damage for team fights. Sometimes you'll hit 20 when your fly has like 40 seconds on cooldown, and you'll know there's a big team fight coming. If you're auto attack build, this is a perfectly fine talent to take in that situation. Or if you just have like some YOLO tank like Muradin just jumping onto the backline and trying to zone you off 1v1 in all your team fights in the late game. If you go an auto attack build with Giant Killer and you pick up Nexus Frenzy, especially if you have your marksman quest stacked at that point, which I would only consider this if you do have your marksman quest stacked, you can absolutely destroy tanks that are trying to 1v1 you. So even if that tank pops a defensive when they see how badly they're getting wrecked, like Avatar or Hardened, remember the Giant Killer is percentage health base, so it's going to destroy them regardless with this much attack speed. Now that we've covered talents, let me show you one more trick I use on global heroes that may help you out on Falstad. So when I'm playing a global, I want to be pressuring the map, but I also want to be ready to come in at a moment's notice when my team needs me. So what I like to do is set a location hotkey on an area on the map where it looks like there's some action brewing and a team fight's about to break out. That way I can, with one hotkey, rapidly switch my perspective from my own hero to that area on the map, and then fly in at the perfect time to help my team. This technique's actually the most useful when you're laning or pushing against another opponent, and you need to be paying attention to two areas on the map at once. And I'll show you how to set that up real quick. What you do is you go into Hotkeys, then Advanced, then Camera. You scroll down until you see Create Location 1. I set mine to a mouse button, and then jump to location 1, which you can set to whichever you like. I just use mouse buttons for ease of access. And then you can use that create location to set an area on the map, be it an objective or just an area where it looks like there's a team fight about to go down. Set your hotkey there, and then you can use your jump to location hotkey to quickly look at that point on the map without having to use to move your mouse around. And spacebar by default brings you back to your hero's perspective. So when you're like dueling somebody in the lane and you want to keep an eye and know when you need to come in with your global, it's useful to just like very quickly shift back and forth. If you're in an intense battle in your lane, you just like very quickly look and you can see what's going on. If you're not really up to that much, you can kind of keep a longer eye on the area and then just like check back on your hero very briefly. Use it however you like. I find it very useful on global heroes in general. You may find it not worth the effort, but go ahead and give it a try. Alright, that's all I've got for you this time. Check out the Tempo Storm website for more HOTS content. This is Tempo Cauthon, and hopefully you learned something new.